Morning, everyone, or afternoon, or if you're burning the midnight oil, greetings, you crazy night owl. This is our meatiest day of weekend resume makeover. This is the steak, or if you're a vegan, this is the seitan of the entire course. Today, we're going to build out your overall resume strategy and then get to the business of drafting this baby section by section. I know you might want to get right down to business with the sections, but we've got to spend some time on the resume strategy first. There's no sense taking a run at this without any kind of a plan or a roadmap. So in this module, I'm going to help you gather up some information, take a few notes, make some strategic decisions, and get all your ducks in a row before we let loose and start drafting this thing. You're going to spare yourself all kinds of agony during the development if you first take the time to think through what specifically you're trying to accomplish here. Who are you trying to influence? What are they going to care about the most? And what messaging are you going to need to put out there in front of their eyeballs in order to grab their undivided attention? I'm going to recommend some steps for you to use in developing this roadmap. Following them in an exact order isn't critical, but I encourage you to complete all these preparation steps before you move into Module 5. And that's where we're going to begin developing your new resume. Be sure and check out the link to our resume roadmap worksheet below if you want an easy place from which you can work through these steps. All right, step number 1, think about your target market. You can't possibly develop a compelling marketing document, which is exactly what this resume is going to be, if you don't understand who you're talking to in the first place. In order to entice your audience into making the decision to contact you for an interview, you have to first think about who you're trying to influence and what they're likely going to want to see on this resume and know about you as a professional. So first you want to ask yourself this: in what industry do I want to work? What specific types of positions do I plan to pursue? What key skills and experiences do these positions call for? You want to make it super easy for the reviewer to get what you could bring into that organization in that job. Jot down a few notes so that you can keep your core audience top of mind throughout the whole resume writing process. Step number 2, study job descriptions. Once you have a ballpark idea of what you're gunning for, you should head over to one of your favorite job boards and snag some job descriptions that line up pretty well with your vision of what that next job looks like. They don't have to be jobs you're actually going to apply for, so go ahead and do a nationwide search on a job board like Indeed, LinkedIn, or maybe a job board that's specific to your industry. The purpose of this exercise is to see the common terms, phrases, and required skills that go along with that type of position. So you want to get your hands on 3 to 5 job descriptions that seem super interesting and relevant, and then compare and contrast. Line them up side by side and highlight the terms and phrases that are used across multiple job ads. Figure out the skills that are most common to the positions that capture your attention. These are going to be very useful as you begin to decide on which key terms to use on the new resume, so be sure and save this stuff for when you begin the actual draft. Next, step number 3, consider your value proposition, or as I like to call it, your so what. In this step, you want to really think about what makes you a great candidate for the types of positions you're going to apply for. Why should a reviewer, whether that's the ATS or applicant tracking system, or a human reviewer, notice or care about you? Because this isn't a given. Prospective employers review tons and tons and tons of resumes for every open position to the point that they all start looking alike, unless they come across a standout. So what makes you a standout? Can you spout that out right here and now? Do you know? You're never going to succeed in articulating your value proposition to a potential employer if you don't even know what yours is. So before you craft a single line on your new resume, I want you to first consider what your value proposition is, or what's my so what. I'll share some of the things that I feel make me a standout as a professional to give you some specific ideas of what I mean by value proposition, because I know that term is kind of blabbery. I'm really good at bringing people together. In fact, some people call me the Match.com of the business world. I live for finding mutual fits among people and organizations and then making the introductions that bring everybody involved together. I also excel at coaching people in a way that's constructive, practical, and inspiring, yet not intimidating. Hopefully you agree with that point. To me, pretense is boring and snobbish and really unnecessary. So I work really hard to ensure JobJenny.com is none of those things. So I would highlight some semblance of these things on my own resume, assuming I were pursuing a position in my same field or something similar. These are the things that make me a standout in my industry. Now it's your turn. Think about your so what. What makes you special compared to the competition? Jot down a few notes. Okay, moving on. Step number 4. Answer these 3 questions in writing for each place you've worked. Number 1, what am I most proud of? Number 2, what do I or what would my supervisors consider my key accomplishments? And number 3, if Jenny Foss were to ask my colleagues, hey guys, what's the best part about working with Sue Smith? How would they answer that question? Often it's the answers to these very questions that will help you realize your true value proposition and enable you to stand apart from the competition. We want to showcase the things that you're best known for, most proud of, and most appreciated for in this new resume. So think about these things now, and then you can choose which ones you're going to build into the resume as you begin writing. The key point for this module, if it's not already abundantly clear, is this. Taking notes and planning before you begin actual development of the resume is going to make the entire process exponentially easier. So get to the business of road mapping and then come right back. We'll start the resume as soon as you're ready. Hey, a reminder here, you may want to work from one of the templates we've provided in the bonus materials, which you'll see below. You can type right into them, they're all Word documents, or if you're not ready to lock into a format quite yet, don't even worry about it right now. Just open up a fresh Word document or text file, or even a good old-fashioned notepad. Prioritize on nailing the content first, and then if you need to loop back and make this thing look pretty once you're done with the draft, that's totally fine. Go with whatever works best for you. Okay, we're going to take it from the top here, and for pretty much anyone going through this course, no matter what your background may be, the top is going to be where you add your name and your contact information. After that, I recommend that you begin with a career summary section. This section is so important for tons of reasons. First, it could be the only thing that a recruiter or reviewer even looks at. Most recruiters are moving very quickly through piles and piles of resumes, and they want to determine if you're a yay or a nay within just a few seconds. If you don't pique their interest right out of the gates, don't expect them to get through your entire resume. The summary section is also super important because it sets the tone for your entire resume. This is your first opportunity to announce your professional brand and provide the human reviewer with an instant snapshot of who you are and in what you specialize with your target audience in mind. The summary is also your most valuable real estate when it comes to connecting the dots for a recruiter or an HR person. Remember, you want to make it very, very easy for people to quickly connect their "here's what we need" to your "here's what Larry Swanson can walk through our doors and deliver," assuming your name is Larry Swanson. You can do that in this section, and in many instances, you can do that even if your experience or your job titles don't line up perfectly with the jobs that you're pursuing. And I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. In short, you want to make the absolute most of this first section, and here's how you can do just that. On your screen, you'll see a sample portion of a resume that we created for one of our own clients. At the top of the page, underneath the contact information, you see 3 job titles running across the top. Why are these here? The job titles are there for 2 important strategic reasons. First, they help make the resume robust in keywords that the resume scanning software may be looking for. But of equal importance, or even more, They are there to give the human reviewer an immediate impression that you are what they're looking for. For this reason, I recommend that you select titles or terms that describe the roles that you're targeting in a generic capacity, even if they're not the exact titles of the job you hold today or you've held in the past. Now, don't get me wrong on this. You can't just flat out lie and give yourself titles that are completely outside of the ballpark of your skills and expertise. Likewise, you don't want to throw in random titles that don't thematically tie together in any way, because this will just confuse the reader more than help them develop an immediate picture of who you are as a professional. So for instance, you're not going to list out laboratory scientist, guitar teacher, woodworking expert, because that would just confuse the hell out of everyone. And hey, have some fun creating a resume around that one. Let me give you a realistic example here, which should help you construct your own titles across the top of your new resume. So say you're a senior marketing manager, but you've got this random title like Head of Marketing Experiences, Benchmarking, and Images. In other words, it's something specific to your company, so it won't probably make a lot of sense to the general population what exactly you're doing in that job. And now let's pretend that you're targeting director of marketing roles and you have a specific interest in using your skills as a marketing strategist and digital analyst. Take a look at a few job descriptions that appeal to you. What are the generic titles that you're seeing most often on these job ads? You can either choose 3 titles or terms by doing some research on what the jobs you're going to be applying for are actually called, or you can make an educated guess. And from that assessment, you'll probably end up with 3 titles that read something like this: Director of Marketing, Senior Marketing Strategist, Digital Marketing Analyst. Again, you want to choose readily understandable terms and ensure that they both summarize you as a professional and have your target job in mind. And always remember this, you're not creating a tattoo here. These titles are malleable and can be swapped in and out or reordered depending on the specific job or jobs that you're pursuing. So don't panic that you're getting locked in here. This section can be easily altered. Okay, so now we've got our titles. Let's get into the meat of the career summary itself. Consider this the best of you section. A simple strategy you might want to use is one that will culminate in a 3 to 5 bullet summary. I typically try to stick with 4, but there's really no hard and fast rule here other than, guys, you totally don't need 17 bullets here. Keep it tight and keep it on point. Okay, here we go. First bullet. This one's a biggie. You want to construct an overarching statement about who you are professionally and in what you specialize. Consider that first bullet your elevator pitch. Your second and third bullets, or second, third, and fourth bullets, however this nets out for you, will each highlight a specific strength you bring to the table or experience that you have that aligns directly with your target employer and what they're looking for. And again, we figure this out by studying job descriptions that capture our attention and then making educated guesses about what we think is most important to showcase. If you can include specific objective evidence of your strengths, even better. For instance, maybe you're a regional sales manager who wants an opportunity to turn around an underperforming market. If you've recently revived a struggling territory and then went on to generate double-digit growth results, this would probably be appropriate to mention as evidence of your turnaround strengths. And then in your final bullet, if you need this, you can spell out specifically how or why your combined background aligns directly with what that target employer is seeking. This last bullet point can really come in handy when you're maybe not a super obvious on-paper match for a job, or if you're trying to make a deliberate career pivot. You can use this last bullet point as a quick opportunity to marry your skills for and outline your intentions to the reviewer so that he or she can understand how or why you're a good match. Remember, guys, no one's going to deduce this for you. You've got to connect those dots. I'll show you an example of this in just a second. So let's build out a sample career summary. Bullet number 1, again, the elevator pitch. Say I'm just this spitfire of a marketing professional who's really great at strategy, leading teams, and managing complex projects. I want a job that will allow me to use these strengths, and in reviewing a few job descriptions that seem super appealing, I realized that these skills are called for in most of those roles. So this could be my first bullet in the summary section. Influential and transformative marketing director with 15 years of experience building brands and driving revenue growth through innovative strategy, exceptional team leadership, and meticulous project execution. See how that works? I'm describing myself in a way that quickly informs the reviewer that A, I'm a marketing leader, B, I've got 15 years of experience, and C, I'm strong with strategy, team leadership, and getting down to business in managing projects. The adjectives at the beginning of this bullet point, influential and transformative, also help paint an immediate picture of who I am and in what I specialize. All right, moving on. Let's say that in the job descriptions I've been studying, I noticed that each of them seems to want or need someone who understands both traditional and digital marketing, and also who can build both marketing strategies and then execute the marketing campaigns. I'm also noticing that relationship building and negotiation skills seem to be a high priority. So maybe then my second and third bullet points go something like this. A best of both worlds marketer with deep expertise across both digital and traditional marketing platforms, and an ability to devise and execute integrated campaigns that engage audiences and deliver strong ROI. Superior rapport building, client relations, and negotiation skills. Drove a 47% increase in revenue and improved brand recognition by forging a strategic alliance with a leading global retailer. And now the final bullet, which is the one that you can use if you need to spell something specific out or connect the dots for your audience. For our marketing manager here, let's say that she was a bookkeeper early on in her career, and now she's planning on looking for a job as a marketing director for a financial services firm. Her knowledge of both marketing and finance may very well help her land that interview. But if her early career experience is just buried or never even mentioned, the reviewer won't likely put two and two together on how valuable that combined experience could be. And so we're going to spell it out for her with a bullet point that goes something like this. Present a skill set that combines marketing leadership with accounting experience. Specifically interested in meshing these areas of expertise to deliver value as a senior marketing leader within a financial services or accounting firm environment. In one quick bullet, we've tied the current and early career experience together, and assuming this person is applying for marketing leadership jobs within financial services firms, that statement is going to help set her apart from competitors who don't have that bookkeeping background. Interestingly, that last bullet reads a bit like an objective, doesn't it? Oh, it does, but bite your tongue, it's not an objective. You don't ever want or need an objective on your resume. Why not? Objectives almost always announce what you want out of the deal and nothing else. They don't support you in any way in your efforts to brand yourself professionally, and they don't tell your future employer what you're going to do for them. And honestly, the typical objective, it uses the same hideous cliche words that I just saw the last 42 people use. Seeking a challenging position within an innovative organization that will allow me to make a contribution to the bottom line while growing as a professional. Don't do this. You'll instantly make your resume look ho-hum to the person plowing through that pile of candidates that just came in, which is the exact opposite of your goal, which is to be a standout. Lose the objective, add the summary. And if you want to get super snazzy as you round out your summary section, consider inserting a pull quote or a soundbite from a performance review or LinkedIn recommendation. If someone has said something nice about you that affirms a specific strength you're trying to highlight, grab that quote and plug it in at the end of the summary. Here's what that might look like. It's rare to find someone so impactful at both strategy and execution. Mary isn't just a marketing leader, she's a marketing force. Okay, you may want to pause the course right now and go scribble out a draft of your new summary section. I'm going to wait right here for you. And next up, we're heading into the key skills territory. And after what you've just banged out with this summary, this next section is going to be a breeze. Are you wondering where to load up all those keywords that you now realize the applicant tracking system is going to come a-looking for? While you can and should use keywords throughout the new resume, creating a separate key skills or areas of expertise section right near the top will help ensure that this baby is loaded with goodness. In the ATS, it's looking for resumes that are loaded with goodness. So this section will also give the human reviewer a very easy and quick way to see the stuff that you know how to do. At jobjenny.com, we construct resumes with the following goal. If the person who reads your resume never gets any further than the summary section and the areas of expertise, they should have a darn good idea of who you are, in what you specialize, and the stuff that you're good at. For sure, we want them to keep going to the end of the resume, but we know that most recruiters and HR people have a gazillion other things going on any given day, and more than likely a bunch of other candidate resumes to get through. Given this, we want those first few seconds to really count. We also want to help the applicant tracking system in deciding to put your resume square into that yes pile. Now, we don't want to overload this section to the point that you look like you're trying way too hard to trick the system. But you do want to lay out skills that you possess and that you know or suspect will be advantageous in your next job. So how do you pick them? We'll go right back into that handful of job descriptions that have captured your attention and study them. What skills are called for across multiple job descriptions? Or are certain skills mentioned more than once? These are the skills you will likely want to include here. Some examples to get you thinking about what to include in this section would be, and this is random, project management, client relations, business development, market research, P&L, team leadership, training, social media, employee supervision, process improvement, consultative sales, cost controls, and so forth. And remember once again that you're not creating a tattoo with this exercise. You can easily swap terms in and out of this section if you need to. The skills that you list can be reorganized if you want to highlight something specific for a particular job application. Make it comprehensive, but don't overload it. People will glaze right over the thing if you overload them. In the glaze over, that's not what we're going for here. So easy enough. That's how you set up your key skills or areas of expertise section. Next, we move on to your work history. And this one's going to be a bit of a doozy, so you might want to get some Fritos, order a pizza real quick, and then I'll see you over in Module 7. We're rolling now, everybody. Rolling! Now that we've got this engine chugging along, let's dive into what for many is the longest and most intimidating portion of the entire resume, your work history or professional experience section. Don't be afraid. This is going to be very doable. Are we ready to rock and roll? Your work history section needs to be written in reverse chronological order, meaning the newest stuff first and the oldest stuff last. This is particularly important if you plan to apply for jobs via online application because that pesky applicant tracking system might not understand the format if you do it any other way. It's also important because recruiters tend to care most about what you've been up to lately and not what you were doing 14 years ago. So in this section, you have the opportunity to showcase the specific stuff that you've accomplished, the stuff that you're proud of, and the stuff that you either suspect or know your future employer is going to care about. Just like with the earlier sections, you want to construct your work history with a solid idea of the type or types of roles you're going to be pursuing, so that you can pick and choose what to highlight based on those jobs. Be very clear that this section is not your autobiography. It's not a list of every little thing that you do or have ever done in each job. Certainly, it's important for your audience to get a feel for the overarching nature of each role and what you've been responsible for. But you've got to take it beyond that and make this a true marketing document. A marketing document that's going to influence the recruiter or decision maker into making that important purchase decision, which is call you up for an interview. That's our goal here. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Rather than saying, responsible for documenting processes and troubleshooting software, or oversee content strategy and social media marketing, or managed an underperforming sales territory. Rather than saying just those things, you want these statements to spell out the significance of why you're sharing that detail or what the result was. You need to go beyond the duties and responsibilities and get to that so what. At JobJenny.com, the way in which we typically structure jobs within the work history for our own resume writing clients follows this general formula. Obviously, you're going to start each job by listing out the name of the employer, location, and the years or months and years that you worked there. You see also that we've added a small blurb underneath that company name that describes this organization very briefly. This can be particularly beneficial if you work for companies that aren't well known or if it's not obvious what they do based on the name of the organization. And then you add your job title. If, by the way, you've got some unusual title that may not be easily recognized by the ATS or human reader, you may want to change your title to something that's more universally recognized, so long as that's still accurate. For instance, if you're a social media strategist by trade, but the company that you work for calls your job community connector or something cutesy or vague, it could hurt you if you don't translate this into something that the computer and the people will understand. Okay, once you've got the header for your job laid in, now you want to add the guts. Here's how we add the guts. We develop a brief statement that describes the overarching nature of your role and what you were hired or promoted to do. Recruited to turn around a struggling geographic market for this global electronics distributor. Oversee sales and business development within the West Coast region with specific responsibility over lead generation, account management, contract negotiation, and market expansion. And then underneath that overview, you want to create a subsection called something like key accomplishments or select highlights. And then construct 2 to 4 bullet points highlighting the stuff that you're most proud of and or that you believe will be most important to share with that target audience. So in this case, maybe we share these specific details. Reversed a 3-year decline in sales, growing revenue by 39% in year 1. Achieved by swiftly restoring a strained relationship with a critical client and opening 12 new accounts. Generated $600,000 in new revenue within the first 6 months by identifying and presenting upsell opportunities to existing customers. Negotiated an advantageous distribution partnership with a large regional consumer electronics manufacturer, a relationship that is tracking to deliver $15 million in annual revenue. It's important that you use the subsection here to call out specific and quantifiable, if possible, highlights that demonstrate your performance and capabilities. The subsection serves a secondary purpose too. It makes it very easy for the person reading the resume to quickly see the most important stuff that you did at each job. And I've said this more than once, but it begs saying again, you should highlight things in this section that will be relevant and important to the particular audience you're trying to influence right now. That said, if the salesperson we've just outlined were trying to shift into a job involving, say, business process improvement, then we absolutely would want to dedicate at least 1 bullet point to something that he had accomplished specifically related to process improvement, because that's what his audience is going to care about. This is an important point if you have or you've had a job that you feel doesn't really line up thematically with the direction you're heading, or maybe wasn't enough of a job to even include. I will argue that most jobs, unless they were a really long time ago or you did them for only just a blip of time, they're worth a mention. Because I'm certain that you did things or learned things at that job that will directly benefit you in what you do next. Think through what those things are and mention those in the Select Highlights section. Here's an example. Let's say I was a marketing manager for a big company on the East Coast, and then my husband got an amazing new job in San Antonio. So we packed up, moved, and then settled into our new home. And then I couldn't find a marketing manager job. So I took a receptionist job at a local yoga studio just so I could keep busy while searching for something more permanent. Once the studio owner got to know me, she realized that I had all of this marketing background, and so she invited me to take on an expanded role doing the company's social media and email marketing. I also started shaping an overall marketing strategy for the business on my own time. So the question is, do I put this on my resume? In my eyes, it feels like a giant step backwards from that big job I had out east, but what do I do about the growing gap in my job history? And if I do list it, how do I make it look at least a little bit impressive? You list it because not only is it preferable over leaving a gap, but because you're doing something that's directly relevant in this job. Now, you may want to make it clear in a subtle but succinct way that this is an interim job that you took due to your relocation, but you for sure want to include this in your work history. Here's how I might handle this exact situation on paper. Again, just like in the salesperson example that we went through, we first outline an overarching nature of the job. In addition to that, and this is super important, the intro makes it instantly clear to the reviewer that I've just relocated. Following a family relocation to San Antonio, accepted a part-time role with this fast-growing wellness studio. This makes it totally understandable why a high-powered marketing manager from the East Coast is now working in a part-time job in Texas. It also subtly implies that this is an interim or bridge job that I've taken while settling into my new city. And then again, you can see in the bullet points beneath the intro statement how we showcase the specific marketing work I've been doing so that the recruiter quickly sees that this isn't some completely unrelated job after all. Okay, let's continue. Once you've completed your write-up for that first job within your work history, you're going to wash, rinse, and repeat for each additional role that you've held. Do you need to include every job you've ever had? Oh, for heaven's sakes, no. Especially if you've been working for a lot of years. Typically, recruiters want to see at most the past 10 to 15 years. If you start going too far back, you're going to risk looking old. And as much as we don't want to consider this, and this is especially true for anyone living and working in a Western culture country, age discrimination does exist. Our culture, like it or not, places strong value on youth and vitality. Certainly employers also value maturity and experience, but only if you also have plenty of youth and vitality to go along with it. So when you list your jobs too far back on the resume, you risk being perceived as a little bit long in the tooth and having the reviewer jump to the conclusion that you are slowing down or winding down, or you don't have current technology skills, or that your healthcare costs are going to get to be really expensive. Yes, it's ridiculous and it's unfair, but it's real. So if you happen to have more than 15 years of experience under your belt, consider strategizing in a way that doesn't enable them to do the math on you and jump to an inaccurate negative conclusion. Now, there are exceptions to this, and here's an important one. If, for instance, you were a call center manager 15 years ago and then shifted into a job as maybe a preschool teacher, but now you want to be a call center manager again, well, then you absolutely need to list that early career experience so that the reviewer understands that you already have that background. And we'll talk more about that during our Day 3 modules. For now, let's keep plowing our way through the resume sections. There is a light at the end of this tunnel. We're about to move into that last module for today, which will teach you how to set up your education and certifications, as well as any additional sections you might want to include. Folks, happy hour is near. Hang with me for just a bit longer, and then we're going to shove you out of here until tomorrow. In this module, we're going to talk about how and where to list your education, as well as certifications or licensure if you work in a field that requires or values these. And then we'll touch on additional sections in the event you want to include things like volunteerism, professional affiliations, a roundup of your tech skills, or any additional information. First rule of thumb is this: you need an education section. Even if you don't have a college degree, you should include an education section on your resume. If you don't, it may score poorly with the resume scanning software. It may also make the human reviewer wonder why the heck it's missing, or what the deal is. So even if you didn't go to college, I'm certain that you've engaged in some educational opportunities along the way that have helped you build or enhance your capabilities. Whether that's a computer programming class, or a selling skills workshop, or maybe some specialized training that your employer sent you to. Or maybe you finished half a degree and then ran out of money or left to have kids, and now you aren't sure how or if you should even list that on your resume. First of all, yes, you should, and I'm going to help you with that. So here we go. Education section in 3, 2, 1. First, you need to decide where on the resume you should put your education section. Normally, it will follow your work history. However, if you happen to have a degree that's viewed as prestigious in your industry or carries heft no matter what the industry, then you might want to bring it up to near the top of the resume, underneath the summary section. Likewise, if your work history shows a gap because, say, maybe you just spent the last 2 years completing a degree program, this would also be an occasion in which you may want to move your education section up near the top. This way, the reviewer's eyes won't go right to the fact that your work history ends in 2014. It will go to the degree that you just completed. And be sure and list the graduation date in that instance so you can explain that gap. So you have certain situations like this that may prompt you to move the education section up to the top, but as a general rule, you're going to list the education right after your professional experience. Wherever you decide to put it, you want to make sure you get it right. So let's take a look at an example. This one is pretty straightforward. Most recent degree typically goes first, and oldest education typically goes last, with exception of when you want to bring something specific up to the forefront for strategic reasons. With our example person here, you'll see that she has a bachelor's degree in journalism and is working toward her MBA. She also has taken a few work-related classes along the way. So we list the MBA in progress first, and notice that we specifically mentioned degree in progress, anticipated completion, fall 2017. That gets the term MBA on the resume, which could be a big advantage depending on what role this woman applies for, but it does so in a way that isn't dishonest or misleading. If the degree isn't done, you can't list it as you having that degree. And trust me when I say this, when your potential employer goes and does that degree verification during a background check, that little white lie will become a giant problem for you. I actually once had a recruiting candidate lose an incredibly generous job offer because he listed a bachelor's degree when, in fact, he was 3 credits short of earning that degree. Okay, back to it. We're going to list the bachelor's degree next. Note with this person that she was a top academic performer and she played on the women's golf team. You definitely want to include major details like this, but unless you've just graduated, go easy here. You don't need to overload it with every little committee or club that you participated in during college. That'll make you look a little bit green and stuck in your glory days. And finally, we round out this section with some specific classes that our sample person has taken. We're going to list classes that show that she has skills that her next employer will probably value, like WordPress and search engine optimization. Easy peasy. Notice too that I didn't list out graduation dates for this person, but I did show years for her continuing education. Use your own judgment with this, but in general, unless you need the dates to explain something, such as why I have a gap in my work history or why I have very little work history at all, I'd leave the dates off, especially if you graduated a long time ago. Again, this is because we want to be very mindful of potential for ageism. And truthfully, once you've got the experience, the fact that you have the degree and the experience, that just speaks for itself. Now, with the one-off courses, I would typically list dates if they are recent so that you can demonstrate an ongoing commitment to learning and illustrate that you have got a fresh skill in that particular thing. And the last thing I want to touch on specific to education is this. What happens if you're a new graduate with very little or no actual work experience in your field of interest? If this is you, I would use your education section to its full potential and showcase specific projects and work assignments that demonstrate your knowledge of or experience within that field you're attempting to enter. Take a look at this one. This person earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering in December 2015. For a variety of reasons and circumstances, the only jobs and internships he held through college weren't directly related to engineering. But he was a high performer and he participated in a couple of complex design projects during his senior year and was also invited to take part in a prestigious collegiate engineering competition. These are things that he should explain in some detail under his education, much like he would highlight within an actual job, so that the reviewer knows he's done the stuff that emulates on-the-job experience and that he was recognized for being really good at engineering while still in college. And then in his work history, this recent grad should highlight the stuff he's most proud of and the things that maybe demonstrate his transferable skills, like ability to deal with customers, problem-solving capabilities, time management, and so forth. Okay, phew. All right, let's shift over into the last sections that you may wish to include on your new resume, and then call her done for today. Certifications and licensure. These matter more in some industries than in others. In some industries, you simply can't have certain jobs without the proper credentials. And in others, it's a pretty big advantage for you to have them. So if this is you, set up a separate section for your certifications or licenses and list them out in the exact way that you see them being called out in the job descriptions, or the exact way that's required by the certifying body. Now, in most cases, you don't need the actual license number or anything like that, but lay them out in your own section so that the applicant's tracking system and the humans can find them really easily. Also, if it's a certification that you know gives you a huge advantage, for instance, if you're looking at project manager roles and you know that being a certified project management professional, or PMP, is something that employers are specifically looking for, well, then you may also want to spell this out in your summary section or list the certifications way far up in your key skills. It's a game of real estate, and you want to use yours to the best advantage. And finally, volunteerism and community involvement. Many, if not most, employers value people who contribute to the greater good of the world and who have interesting things going on in their non-work time. So even if you're not specifically looking for a job in the nonprofit sector, it's generally smart to include your volunteer work and your community involvement on your new resume. Now, you want to make sure that you're not listing anything that might be controversial or completely polarizing. For instance, if you're a fundraiser for some extreme right-wing political organization, or if you volunteer for an agency whose mission could be offensive to some certain parties or cause someone to prejudge you, I'd leave that off. I'd also leave off really old or super ancillary stuff that you've done, like picking weeds at your kid's school, because then you're going to look like you're trying way too hard to come across as a do-gooder. But assuming you've got some relatively current and meaty things to include, I would for sure add them into this separate section. Top of the morning, everybody. Or maybe it's top of the evening, top of your lunch break. Whatever time it may be for you, welcome. It's the third and final day of Weekend Resume Makeover. We are officially in the home stretch. In today's modules, we're going to cover a few important topics. We'll talk about finalizing and saving your new resume. We'll also chat about how to handle some of the more common situational issues, like gaps in your work history or jobs that maybe you wish you'd never taken. And I'm going to teach you how to customize your resume for those times in which you want to apply for a job that's maybe just a little bit outside of your primary target market. In fact, let's start with that one. If there's one message that I'm hoping has come through loud and clear through the Weekend Resume Makeover, it's this. You've got to make it easy for the reviewer of your resume, whether that's the ATS or the human reviewer, to quickly connect the dots between here's what we need and here's what this amazing candidate can walk through our doors and deliver. I'm going to assume that if you've already started putting your resume down on paper, you've done so with your primary goal or primary type of job in mind, which is good. The strongest marketing materials are those that speak directly to your audience and deliver a message specifically designed to entice them or prompt action. But you may have secondary interest in another type of job, or maybe you just bumped into something incredibly cool, yet your resume doesn't speak loud and clear to the deliverables that this job is calling for. What do you do in these instances? First and foremost, you adjust the resume. As we discussed early on in Weekend Resume Makeover, you simply can't assume that anyone is going to figure out how or why you make perfect sense for that job. So if you're dying to apply for some one-off job that's maybe on the fringe of your primary focus, it stands to reason that your main resume isn't going to hit the reviewer square across the chops and make them realize, oh, hell yes, this person's a great match. And the same goes for the applicant tracking system when it scans your resume in search of keywords. If you really want a strong shot at that one-off job, you've got to spend at least a little bit of time editing this resume. Now, the tips I'm about to share here assume that you've not just created the resume of an electrical engineer and now you suddenly want to apply for underwriter jobs. These are two entirely separate resumes, very different deliverables, very different resumes. But let's say that you've just created a resume that hard angles you toward field sales jobs within the cosmetics industry, and now you're staring at an amazing sales manager job posting in another industry. If you've done this correctly, your field sales resume probably hits hard on things like your ability to bring in new customers, blow away quota, and upsell current clients on new or expanded offerings. And all that's good, and these are important things for an individual contributor sales role. But for the sales leadership position, the job description probably calls for capabilities that exceed can bring in the bucks. It probably shows requirements like team building, motivation, forecasting and planning, and strength in forging high-level strategic alliances. Stuff that the individual contributor doesn't necessarily have to do in his or her day-to-day job. And so in an instance like this, I would open up my field sales resume and make the following modifications. Number one, I'd change the titles across the top of the resume. Remember, you've listed a few titles across the top of your new resume to set the stage for the reviewer. You're introducing yourself using titles that will likely mirror the titles of the roles that you're pursuing. So the easiest modification, assuming it's plausible for you to position yourself this way, is to change at least one of the titles so that you're including sales manager or director of sales or something close to the title of that specific sales leadership job that you've got your eye on. Again, you want to look as if you are that thing that the reviewer is looking for. Number two, modify the career summary. This is where you'll probably do the most editing because you're going to need to introduce yourself as a sales manager, not just as a salesperson. So go right back into Module 5 and walk through the process of summary development with this new job in mind. Now, some of your bullet points may stay the exact same because in this case, I'm guessing there will be considerable overlap in what a salesperson job and a sales leader job look like. However, be sure that in your summary section for this sales leader role, you highlight your capabilities in things like leadership, financial management, strategic partnership development, or whatever that job description is telling you are important requirements so that you make perfect sense to the reviewer right out of the gates. By the way, and this may be the world's most obvious tip, but I'm going to pause for a moment and say it anyway. Save your edits as a totally separate file so that you have both resumes at your fingertips when you're done. You don't want to write over all the great work that you just did in resume number one. I know. Thanks for the great tip there, Jenny Foss. My pleasure. All right. Number 3 way to customize your resume for a one-off job, modify the key skills. You've created an areas of expertise or key skills section. And if you're the cosmetics industry salesperson here, you've likely highlighted specific skills that would align with an individual sales performer. Presentations, negotiation, territory management, Salesforce.com, and so forth. Now you'll need to adjust this section so that it's more heavily loaded with skills that would be indicative of a sales leader. And again, review the job description and see what they're asking for. Assuming that you have these leadership skills, you'll want to add them into this section. Now, you don't want to try and cram dozens of skills in here, so when you add the new, more representative skills, edit out a few that are going to be either non-important based on your understanding of this job, or those that could potentially put you at risk for looking a little too green for a sales leadership role. You can also reorder the key skills so that the most important ones are near the top. Remember, humans read top to bottom, left to right, so the most important skills should be near the top and/or in the left column, assuming you've built this section as a 2 or 3 column list. Moving on to number 4, which is modifications to your actual work history. Sometimes very little needs to be changed within your work history, especially if this one-off role is quite close to the core market or core type of job that you're targeting. However, in an instance like our salesperson who's trying to bump up into a sales manager role, you may want to hit harder on any work that you've done that demonstrates your leadership, your ability to build teams, or your financial management strengths. Even if you've never been called a sales manager by title thus far in your career, you may well be doing things in your current job, or maybe you've done things in prior jobs that clearly demonstrate your leadership or your management capabilities. And these are the things that you want to consider calling out specifically. It could be just subtle word choices, but take a spin through each job within your work history and consider if you need to modify one or more of the key accomplishments so that you're directly calling out any management capabilities. For instance, maybe you were chosen to be the interim sales manager while your boss was out on maternity leave. That would be a really good thing to highlight. Or maybe you took on some side project that involved leading a big group of people. Also good to feature that. These types of things, which may not be the same accomplishments you called out on your salesperson resume, would be applicable for your sales manager version and increase the odds that the recruiter or hiring manager views you as sales manager qualified. If you need more guidance on this as you work through the customization process, you can head right back to Module 7 and walk through it with this different lens or target role in your mind. Okay, these are the main sections that you'd want to consider changing if you're applying for a one-off job or trying to influence a slightly different core audience. Next, we're going to talk about how to handle the blips, the bloops, the gaps, and for some of us, the total face plants in the most strategic ways possible. Fresh out of college, I was recruited into a job called Public Relations Director for a company that was like this wholesale buying club for consumers. I'd just finished my journalism degree, so it was such a huge relief that in the midst of a really crummy job market, I'd just landed what I thought was a decent entry-level PR job. Turns out that was no PR job at all. I'd landed this insane telemarketer job that had me and a room full of other public relations directors just hammering people over the phone in an effort to convince them to sign up for this expensive club that supposedly gave them buying power that consumers don't typically have access to. We had to follow word-for-word scripts, which, by the way, I was absolutely horrible at, and if we didn't, we got written up by the supervisor. I didn't wait around until I got written up. As fast as I could land another job, which was as a reporter at a tiny newspaper 50 miles from my house, I got the heck out of there. That was my career blooper. Fortunately, I didn't stick around long, and it was super early on in my career. So at least so far as my resume was concerned, I just pretended like it never happened in the first place. But what if you're someone who has a more pronounced issue to contend with, which, by the way, is a lot more common than most people realize? I will assure you that you're not the only person on this earth who's ever been fired or taken some crappy job or never finished your degree or quit a great job to stay at home with your kids for 5 years. So how do you smooth out the gaps, the hiccups, and the bloopers so that the issue either flat out doesn't come up with a prospective employer, or if it does, It's a swift conversation without negative ramifications. So let's run through a few common scenarios and discuss the ways to tackle each of them. Now keep in mind, for instance, if you're a CPA who was jailed for embezzlement or a bus driver with a DUI record, these tips might not help you out that much. But for the vast majority of us, there are plenty of ways you can smooth out issues that you're feeling sensitive about. Let's cover a few of them. Scenario 1, I got laid off and I didn't find a new job for 18 months. This is probably among the most common issues that job seekers face, the dreaded gap. And before I talk specifics, let me say this. Even though it probably felt like you're the only person on this earth to have ever lost your job, please understand this. You're not alone. Oh my gosh, you're not alone at all. In fact, your competition may very well have similar gap issues on their resumes, especially considering that we just weathered a horrible economic downturn and lots of people got laid off from their jobs. I was living and working in Detroit in 2008, right when the economic implosion began to take hold. Being in the heart of the automotive industry, I knew just as many people who were out of work as I did people who had jobs. It was brutal. My point here is this. Even if you're really sensitive about this issue, understand recruiters see gaps on resumes all the time. Sure, you'll want to deal with it strategically. And yes, you're going to want to walk into interviews prepared to talk about it matter-of-factly and with confidence. But don't let it unravel you mentally. Okay, back to the scenario person who was laid off for 18 months. Here are a couple of quick and easy ways that you can soften the gap and manage that message. First, the quickest thing to do is remove the months from the chronology and just list out your years of employment. That way, if you got laid off in, say, March 2013 and didn't go back to work until September 2014, you could list the job that you were laid off from as 2010 to 2013, and then the job that followed as 2014 to present. It doesn't totally eliminate the gap, but it makes it appear to be a year or less on paper. Another thing that you can consider doing is going on the offense in managing the message. I always tell my clients that your best defense is a good offense. If you suspect that a reviewer might raise an eyebrow about something, just assume that they will. And then you can control the message proactively. So if you're that person who was out of work for 18 months, in addition to removing the months on your resume, maybe you could also begin the overview of that job that you started in 2014 with something like this. Following the bankruptcy of XYZ company, accepted an opportunity to manage national accounts for this global furniture manufacturer. This, of course, assumes that the company you were laid off from is XYZ company. What this type of message does is explains quickly and succinctly why you were out of work, and it also implies that you're not embarrassed to discuss it. If by chance you've been out of work and aren't yet back to work, you could also explain it within the body of the job you were laid off from. In this instance, I'd consider building the message in as a bullet point under your select highlights. You could do something like this. Position eliminated unexpectedly following market downturn and organizational realignment. Now, if you were fired for performance issues or have some other doozy scenario on your hands, I wouldn't necessarily spell the details out quite so transparently. If you have super challenging circumstances that could require some magical PR spin, it actually may be worth your while to talk through the specifics of your situation with a career coach, a recruiter, or a job search strategist. But this should give you some ideas on how to manage straightforward gaps caused by things like layoff. Okay, moving on to scenario 2. I've been a stay-at-home parent for the past 5 years. This is another really common resume issue. What do I do with my resume if I have no official work history past, say, 2011? Many people would be inclined to do a functional resume in this situation, which is one that outlines skills and capabilities all the way up at the top of the resume without tying these capabilities to any specific jobs or dates. I'm going to vote big NO on that plan for a couple of important reasons, which we touched on earlier in the course, but let's do it again here. First, the applicant tracking system could have a really hard time reading and correctly parsing your resume if you don't use reverse chronological order. In this case, you may never even make it to the human reviewers. And second, recruiters take one look at functional resumes and we instantly think, okay, what's this person trying to hide? And more often than not, we discover it's a gap. So in trying to hide your gap, you end up bringing more attention to it, which is the exact opposite outcome that you're hoping for. If you've been out of work for the past few years as a stay-at-home parent or any other reason, consider using a strategy that goes more like this. Most of you have something that you've been doing during your time away from work that could be categorized as a job. I'm not talking about folding laundry or helping with really hard math homework or getting my kids to karate on time. Don't get me wrong, those things are all ridiculously important. Employers just don't want to see it on your resume. However, most people have above and beyond stuff that they've been doing during their time off, maybe as a stay-at-home parent, perhaps without even realizing that it's technically a job. If you've taken on any part-time work or projects, even volunteer projects at your kids' school, or maybe the soccer association, or at the yoga studio around the corner, consider listing these in your work history as jobs. It doesn't matter if it wasn't a paid position or if you only worked at it for like 5 hours a week. If it's a noteworthy undertaking or a job that will help a reviewer see some of your talents, just go ahead and add it to your work history. I've worked with some incredible stay-at-home parents who came to me as they were attempting to transition back into the workforce. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they'll walk into my office almost apologetic about how little official work they've been doing in recent years. But then 5 minutes into the conversation, we're talking about all these really cool things that they've been up to, in addition to raising their kids, that could easily be listed out not just as jobs, but as impressive jobs. One woman I worked with a while back told me, almost under her breath, about this little jewelry making side business that she'd been running for the past few years. Not only was this little jewelry making side business keeping her operations management, customer service, business development, and marketing skills strong, you know what, as it turns out, her jewelry had been featured in major magazines and was being sold in a couple of really big department stores. And so here she was dwelling on the notion that she had nothing to show for her last several years, at least so far as a resume was concerned. And she had all this great stuff. So while you may not be running a sideline jewelry store that's exploding all over the place, chances are you've got some side activities, whether they're paid projects or volunteer work, that you can add to your experience section and close up that gap. As an aside, if you have been a stay-at-home parent for a stretch of time and you're feeling nervous that some of your technology skills may be outdated, I would strongly consider enrolling in a relevant online class or two. These classes will help you sharpen those skills that you suspect will be necessary or advantageous in your next job. And even better, the moment you enroll in one of these classes, you get to put it on your resume in the education section. This will then show the reviewer your commitment to keeping your skills fresh and your thirst for expanding your knowledge. Okay, that's the stay-at-home mom scenario or someone who's been out of work for a period of years. Let's cover one more. Scenario 3, I've had 3 jobs over the past year and a half. Say you've bounced around quite a bit in your career in recent years. Maybe you took a job and it wasn't at all as it was presented to be during the interview, and so you quit. Or maybe you didn't realize that the company was about to hit the skids financially, and 6 months after you arrived, they declared bankruptcy. Or maybe a month after you'd settled into a new job, someone contacted you with some too good to be true opportunity, and you jumped at it, only to discover that it was, in fact, too good to be true. Whatever the specifics, when you bounce around from job to job over a relatively short period of time, your resume starts to look like you're some kind of nervous hummingbird, and potential employers are going to wonder what's up. So here are a couple of ideas on how to manage this situation. First, you can consider the drop the months and only list the years strategy. You also might want to launch right from the resume any job that was either super short in duration or those that aren't vital when it comes to painting the picture about who you are as a professional. For instance, say you had this great job as a customer service manager that started in October of 2013. 6 months into it, the company went through some big reorg and your job was eliminated, just like that. You couldn't find another customer service manager role right away, and you started to panic. So you accepted a lower paying job as a customer service associate instead in July 2014. As the summer was coming to the end, you saw a posting for a killer customer service manager job. You applied for it, and a month later, you landed it. So on paper, this is what that looks like. October 2013 to April 2014, customer service manager, XYZ company. July 2014 to September 2014, customer service associate, ABC Unlimited. And September 2014 to present, customer service manager, R2D2 Associates. You know what I would do in this case? I'd pull ABC Unlimited right out of that resume and shift the dates from months and years to years only. That turns the resume into this: 2013 to 2014, customer service manager, XYZ company. 2014 to present, customer service manager, R2D2 Associates. You've eliminated the hopper effect entirely, and you've also eliminated the perception that you might have been demoted to an associate level role. Now, there are certainly instances in which it's just not so simple to explain your rapid transitions away. In cases where you feel that it's necessary to leave all the jobs on the resume, I'd use that same best defense is a good offense method that we discussed a few minutes ago during the layoff example. I'd briefly and succinctly explain the transitions right in the descriptions of what you did at that job, so the reviewer won't sit there and wonder. You'll have just told them, and you'll have the opportunity to control the message proactively. Are you totally ready to get this thing wrapped up and rolling? Let's do it. First, we need to make sure your new resume is polished and consistent in formatting. So before you call her done with your ridiculously awesome new resume, settle on into a comfy chair, pour yourself a glass of wine or a bowl of Cheetos, and look very, very closely at your work. It's important that you know something. You're going to be judged harshly for sloppy mistakes on your new resume. You may very well be ruled out entirely if you've got several going on. Final review is an important assignment here, and by final review, I don't just mean run the thing through spell check. Yes, absolutely, you gotta run the thing through spell check, but you also need to read through it carefully to make sure that everything reads smoothly and that spell check didn't miss something that maybe was spelled correctly, but the wrong word choice to begin with for that particular sentence. You also want to make sure that you've got consistency in the way that you're structuring the headers and the subheads. If you're bolding certain things, you want to make sure the same certain things are bolded throughout the entire resume. And likewise, if you're italicizing things, for instance, the little blurbs that describe the company at which you've worked, make sure you're doing so consistently throughout. You also want consistent spacing and clean page breaks. And if you've got a full 2-pager, make sure it's not so close that on certain operating systems, the viewer may see a couple of dangling lines onto a 3rd page. You don't want danglers. If this is going on as you finish the resume, try tightening up the formatting, adjusting the margins a little bit, or cropping out a bit of non-critical content to ensure that it all fits cleanly. Once you've got a handle on all of this, you're ready to save your new resume. All right, so what should you call it? I don't think there's one hard and fast, one and only answer to this, but there is one hard and fast answer when it comes to what not to name it, and that's my resume or resume.doc. Don't be this generic. A recruiter may not be able to readily find you in his or her system if you're among 72 others with that similar file name. You also don't want to list out version numbers when naming your resume. The reviewer actually does not care which version it is. I recommend to clients that you go with one of two approaches when naming your resume. If you're a straightforward, conservative professional, I would just do your name. Jim Smith resume.doc, for example. Or if you want to use this real estate as a means to begin branding yourself professionally, you might want to go with something like Jim Smith marketing strategist.doc. Nothing to get all in an uproar about. Keep it simple, but make it clear who you are in the naming. You should, however, get in an uproar, or at least be very mindful of the file format that you use. People often ask me, what should I send out? A doc file, a PDF, a text file? My answer to this is, it depends. It depends because the answer is going to be yes to all three, depending on how you're submitting your information. A doc or a docx file is your best bet when you're uploading the document into an online application in its entirety. As in, you're not copying certain blocks of information and then pasting them into the fields within that application. The reason that the doc file is the best for these instances is that some applicant tracking systems have a really hard time reading and parsing information from a resume that's been saved in a PDF format. And if the ATS can't read your info, you lose. So save your resume as a doc or a docx file for online applications. PDFs are great because no matter what operating system the person opening this file has or which fonts they have installed on their computer, the formatting is preserved in the universal PDF format. So in addition to saving the resume as a doc file, you should also consider saving it as a PDF. And then finally, a text file is best for those instances in which you're copying certain blocks of text out of your resume and pasting them into the various fields within an online application, because the text file strips away formatting symbols that can disrupt the parsing process or end up looking all garbled when you plop them into the application fields. One resume, 3 versions. And once you've got them all lined up like shiny little ducks right in a row on your computer, I'd also consider uploading them to like a cloud-based storage option, maybe Dropbox or Google Drive. That way, if your computer implodes tomorrow, you don't lose all the hard work you've just put into this fantastic new resume. Hey, speaking of fantastic new resume, do you have one now? Are you close? Hopefully, you're either holding something in your hot little hands that you're going to be proud to start handing out, or you now have the confidence and the tools that you need to bust this thing out so you can start applying for amazing new things right away. Pew, pew, pew! We are at the end. Okay, we're nearly at the end. First, I've got Karen Friesen here. She's my right-hand woman at jobjenny.com, and we're going to go through a few of the questions that we hear most often about resumes. Karen, are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
First question. What should I do about my oldest experience?
Ooh, good one. I guess that depends. Are we talking 5 years, 10, 20? For a general rule of thumb, I would go back 12 to 15 years. The only time I would go back further than that is if you've got experience prior that's going to help paint the picture of who you are to the audience that you're looking at right now. So for instance, say you were a retail store manager maybe 15 years ago, and then, I don't know, you ran a daycare center between then and now. Well, now maybe you find a job at Nordstrom and you want to apply for that. I would absolutely showcase that earlier retail experience because that's going to give the people at Nordstrom an idea that you've got that background and how and why you make perfect sense. Otherwise, I would go with 12 to 15 years.
Are you sure that I don't need a career objective?
Oh, gosh, no. You know what? Most objectives, they just say absolutely nothing. I mean, it just says, hey, my objective is to find a job at a growth-oriented, challenging company, blah. I would use that section, I'm assuming you're talking at the top of the resume, to put a career summary. And this is your opportunity to showcase your value proposition, or I call it your so what. It gives you a chance to set the stage and introduce your professional brand in a way that you can never do that with an objective.
All right. So then as I'm writing, should I use third person or first person tense?
Ooh, I would go first person minus the pronouns. So meaning you take off the I's, the me's, the my's. When you have your name at the top of a resume, it's assumed that you are, in fact, the author. So when you talk about yourself in the third person, Jerry is an accomplished, engaging project manager. When you talk like that, you look pompous and overly stuffy, and it just really doesn't flow as well as if you go first person minus the pronouns.
So I have always heard that your resume should only be 1 page long. Do you think it's okay for me to go longer than that?
Yes, 1,000 times yes. I don't know how or where or why this myth came about where it cannot be more than a page long at any cost. It makes me crazy. It's really hard to keep your resume to a 1-page format unless you're just fresh out of college or maybe you've only had one job throughout your whole career. And so if you're trying like crazy to keep it to 1 page, what could happen is you err on the side of brevity to the point that your audience can't figure out who you are or why they should care about you. And so rather than trying to cram everything onto one, it's perfectly okay to go to a couple of pages, or honestly, if you have to, go to a 3rd page. Most of the resumes that we do at Job Jenny, though, are a 2-page format. So I would not worry about that for 1 second.
Okay. So say I've done a lot of project work. How can I list those engagements out without being really long, making the resume really long?
That can be hard. So, and you see this particularly with people who work in consulting roles, or they have maybe they're IT project managers and they've got a lot of big projects that they've done. What I would do in your job history is do a general write-up that describes the nature of your job there, and then subsection it and say key client engagements or key projects, and then just select out 3 or 4 that you're particularly proud of or that you think speak very well to the deliverables of that job that you're going after right now. And honestly, you could swap them in and out depending on the role that you're pursuing. So just keep in mind, this is a marketing document. So you want to present yourself in the best light for whatever that is that you're going after. You don't have to worry about making it your autobiography.
So do I have to list the dates for the positions I've held?
Oh, for sure. I would list the dates. I'd list them for a couple of reasons. Number one, the humans that are reviewing that resume, they're going to want to know what you did, when, and where. But also, if you're applying for a job through an online application process, your resume is probably going through an applicant tracking system. And if you submit a resume that doesn't have these items like dates that the tracking system is out there looking for, your information might parse incorrectly into the system. And in the worst case, you're never coming out the other side, so you'll never be reviewed by humans. So yes, absolutely. Reverse chronology for your resume.
And where do you think I should put my education? It seems like I should put it first.
I would only put your education first if maybe you're a new grad and you don't have a lot of work experience to show underneath that, or if you have a degree in progress, maybe, or if you've got a really super prestigious degree that you want to pop right up to the top because you know it's going to give you an advantage in your job search. But otherwise, I would probably put it near the end. We typically put them on the bottom of page 2, or if you have a 1-page resume at the bottom of that page.
Should I include my graduation year when I list my degree?
Generally speaking, no. Especially if you're an older worker or a more experienced worker, because at a certain point in time, those dates start working against you. I think the only time that I would list the graduation dates would be like if you're a brand new graduate and you need to explain, here's why I don't have a lot of work experience, or if you have a degree in progress, or if those dates would help to explain a career gap. So if you went back to school from 2011 to 14, and oh, by the way, you have a gap in your career, that might help explain to the reviewer that you were in school full time. But otherwise, I would just leave the dates off.
Should I include a list of references or write down references available upon request?
No to both. So when an employer is ready to check your references, they're going to ask you for them 100% of the time. So listing them out on your resume, it's not only jumping the gun, it's wasting real estate. I would leave them off, and you also don't need references available upon request. It's not like they're not going to ask you for them unless they see that line. But yeah, I would go ahead and leave them off. And that way, when they do ask you for them, you can follow up with the people that you want to use for references and use that as the opportunity to not only make sure they're still okay with it, but maybe even prep them for what you think they're going to be asked and how they can answer those questions. So no, leave them off.
Okay. Jenny, I have one more big question for you.
Oh, I'm waiting for that one.
How do you think it is that we got to be so much fun to work with?
Oh, Karen, I think we were born fun. We were born fun.
We were.
We really were. Hey, on that note, we hope that you guys have had at least a smidgen of fun through the weekend resume makeover process. More importantly, we hope that you're finishing this course feeling ready to roll with whatever opportunity you've got on your radar now, or the one that's surely right around the corner. I want to wish you all the best of luck and thank you so much for being a part of Weekend Resume Makeover.